Terrorism, a word so powerful that it can justify wars, redraw borders, and silence entire populations. Yet, for all its force, it has no single meaning. What one government calls counterterrorism, another calls state terror. The word itself is a mirror, reflecting the fears and ambitions of whoever wields it. The story of terrorism begins not in the 21st century, but in revolutionary France. The year was 1793, and the Jacobin government under Maximilien Robespierre began the infamous Reign of Terror. They used systematic executions to defend the revolution from its enemies. Ironically, the first terrorists were not rebels, they were the state itself. Robespierre even declared terror is nothing other than justice, prompt, severe, inflexible. As centuries passed, the word's meaning flipped. In the 19th century, groups like the Russian Voila targeted czars and elites, using violence as political theater. They called it propaganda by deed, showing that even one act of defiance could shake an empire. By the early 20th century, anti-colonial movements in Asia and Africa adopted similar tactics. Revolutionaries in Ireland, India, and Algeria viewed violence not as chaos but as a form of resistance. British officials called them terrorists. Their followers called them freedom fighters. The divide in definition was born, and it never healed. Every decade that followed layered new meanings on the word. After World War II, the creation of the United Nations brought hope for global order, but also a dilemma. The UN's attempts to define terrorism failed again and again because members could never agree whether armed struggle for liberation should count as terrorism. By the time we reached the Cold War, the term had become a tool in ideological battles. Both superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, funded proxy groups while condemning the others as terrorists. In essence, terrorism was no longer a fixed phenomenon. It was a label, a political weapon disguised as moral language. The seed was sown, but the modern era, the one that shaped global headlines, was yet to come. The world entered a new phase after the Second World War. The old empires were collapsing and the newly independent nations were trying to find their configuration in the modern world. In this turbulent atmosphere, terrorism took on fresh colors. Between the 1960s and the 1980s, it became a global language of rebellion, ideology, and despair. In Latin America, left-wing guerrilla groups like the Tomporos in Uruguay and FARC in Colombia blended revolutionary theory with armed struggle. Their targets were banks, diplomats, and government offices, symbols of inequality and Western influence. Across Europe, groups like Germany's Red Army faction and Italy's Red Brigades justified kidnappings and assassinations as attacks against what they called capitalist fascism. In the Middle East, the story was different but connected. The creation of Israel in 1948 and the displacement of Palestinians fueled decades of militant resistance. Organizations such as the Palestine Liberation Organization (PLO) and later more radical factions like Black September turned the global spotlight towards their cause through shocking acts, airplane hijacking, hostage crisis, and televised violence. During the same period, ethnic nationalism also ignited insurgency. The Irish Republican Army (IRA) waged a long campaign against British rule in the Northern Ireland, while ETA in Spain fought for Basque independence. Each group had distinct motives, yet all used the same underlying method: striking fear to gain political attention in a world driven by media. Meanwhile, superpowers quietly manipulated the chaos. The United States and the Soviet Union armed and trained militant movements that served their strategic interests. Washington backed the Contras in Nicaragua and the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. Moscow supported revolutionary factions from Angola to Yemen. Violence became currency in the geopolitical marketplace. This period transformed terrorism from an occasional act into a sustained political strategy. Ideology gave it moral justification, television gave it visibility, the camera replaced the soul. Every explosion was a message. By the 1980s, the stage was set for something darker. National struggles and ideological wars were about to fuse with religion, creating a new and unpredictable force that will redefine terror for the next generation. The 1980s and the 1990s marked a seismic shift. Terrorism, once rooted in ideology or nationalism, began to intertwine with religion, faith, identity, and politics, fused into a volatile mix that the world had never seen before. It began with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. What started as a regional conflict soon became a global jihad. Fighters from across the Muslim world poured into Afghanistan, supported by American funding and Pakistani intelligence. The goal was to defeat the Soviets, but the byproduct was the rise of a transnational militant identity, believers who saw holy war not as politics but as a religious duty. When the Soviets withdrew in 1989, these fighters did not disband. They scattered across continents, taking with them training, ideology, and a sense of divine mission. Out of this chaos emerged a name that would redefine the world's security vocabulary: Al Qaeda. Founded by Osama bin Laden, Al Qaeda rejected borders, governments, and compromise. It claimed to fight against Western domination and what it saw as the moral decay of modern civilization. Its early operations, embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, the attack on the USS Cole, were mere preludes to what came next. While the militancy gained attention, other regions faced their own terror waves. In Sri Lanka, the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam (LTTE) pioneered suicide bombings and built one of the world's most organized insurgent armies. In Japan, the cult-armed Shinkoyo released sarin gas in the Tokyo subway in 1995, merging apocalyptic religion with terrorism. In the Middle East, Israel faced suicide attacks from groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad, while Lebanon saw Hezbollah rise from the ruins of civil war as both a militia and political entity. And now, Israel itself has turned into a terrorist state. Each movement was shaped by local grievances but connected by a shared message. The line between resistance and terror was determined by who defined it. By the late 1990s, the internet began to transform the battlefield. Propaganda, recruitment, and coordination no longer required face-to-face contact. Terrorism was evolving into a global network, borderless, ideological, and increasingly sophisticated. The stage was not set for the event that would reshape the 21st century and permanently alter how the world understood terror. September 11, 2001 shattered every previous framework through which terrorism had been understood. 19 hijackers turned commercial airlines into weapons, striking the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, killing nearly 3,000 people in a few hours. It wasn't only the scale of the tragedy that changed the world, it was its spectacle. The attacks were designed not merely to destroy but to broadcast power, an image of defiance that looped endlessly across global television screens. In the aftermath, the United States launched the War on Terror, a campaign that would define global politics for decades. Afghanistan was invaded in 2001 to dismantle Al Qaeda and remove the Taliban government. 2 years later, Iraq became the next target under the claim of weapons of mass destruction, a claim that never held up but still redrew Middle Eastern geopolitics. Terrorism, once a decentralized phenomenon, was now framed as an existential enemy of civilization. The US created the Department of Homeland Security, expanded surveillance networks, and adopted preemptive defense doctrines. Other nations followed the suit, creating laws that brought in state powers in the name of security. But with every drone strike and military occupation, new grievances were born. Civilian casualties, indefinite detentions, and the imagery of occupation became recruitment tools for the very groups these wars aimed to destroy. By the mid-2000s, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, led by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, began mutating into something far more dangerous. Simultaneously, terrorism itself diversified. In Europe, homegrown extremism emerged, where disaffected youth, often born and raised in Western societies, carried out attacks inspired by global narratives of oppression. In Asia, in Africa, organizations like Boko Haram, Al Shabaab, and Abu Sayyaf turned regional instability into their own battlegrounds. Governments struggled to adapt. Traditional counterterrorism relied on borders and armies, but the threat now came from decentralized cells, lone actors, and online radicalization. The internet had become both megaphone and battlefield, turning ideology into a viral contagion.